Mr. Bison flips!
Mr. Bison flips! Mr. Bison flips! Mr. Bison flips!
Good evening, Year 12. Today we're going to have a look at Keats's poem Ode to Autumn. This is often known as his masterpiece in a sense because it's technically meant to be one of the most perfect poems. It's fairly balanced and it's considered perfect in many different ways. So we're going to have a look at it technically. As you can see, it's a 3-stanza poem. Each stanza has 11 lines. Loosely iambic pentameter throughout. There are some variations, and quite similar rhyme schemes. There's an ABAB quatrain to introduce the ideas, and then these are developed in the next 7 lines, which are slightly different in the 2 stanzas. You can have a look at the rhymes there yourselves. It's like the other Keats poems in that it explores temporality, mutability and mortality. We're dealing with the end of the year, but also with the end of the day and the end of life, and thereby exploring mortality, perhaps a bit more metaphorically than literally. But it's a bit different from the other ideas in that it doesn't provide imagination as an escape from reality, but rather humans have to. It's more of acceptance of the fact that we are mortal, and it's not seeking to pause time the way that he may be trying to in some of the other poems, like Ode to a Grecian Urn or Ode to Indolence. So let's have a look at the first 11 lines in stanza 1. Obviously, again, we're dealing with an ode, i.e. it's a celebration. We're looking at, he's showing the reverence for autumn as a season, and the peace, he's kind of at peace, but it's also showing, respecting the peace that autumn is providing. So technically the three stanzas are divided into kind of 3 different ideas, and it's celebrating 3 different aspects of autumn. So stanza 1 deals with late summer, so we get the hints of summer still coming through. It's about ripening, plentiful warmth and energy. It's the time when we get all the fruits from nature. So stanza 1 is really full of life. It even has an echo of pregnancy in some of the vocabulary. Some of the diction hints at ripening inside a woman. And autumn is personified as a provider of life and provider of articles. In the second stanza, autumn is becoming, it's more dealing with mid-autumn. It's the harvest season. Things are slowing down and cooling off and winding down. The year is coming to an end and life is coming to an end. So in stanza 2, autumn is personified as a harvester. He's patient, he's careful. There are hints there that he's a reaper man, and all the connotations that come with that. In stanza 3, we're dealing with late autumn, which is sort of the early winter, which is really the time of dying. Things are going cold, but it's a time of reconciliation. It's a calm and collected person that's facing winter and the end of things. So it's much more about surrendering and calmly accepting winter and death than in the previous poems. So now we can finally get into the first stanza. And I think you'll find straight away, if you look at the alliteration throughout stanza 1, that is quite a reassuring type of sound. It's full of reassuring sounds, and it's quite calm. And I think that's primarily produced through the M's, mist and mellow and bosom and maturing. They're all quite warm and calm sounds. And possibly also the S's that come later on in shells and sweet and flowers and bees are kind of reassuring and homely type of sounds. It's interesting with the first stanza that it actually appears grammatically and syntactically as one sentence in terms of the punctuation and the way it's set up, but it's lacking a finite verb to actually drive the sentence anywhere. It doesn't really do anything other than just describe things. If we stay with the grammar for a bit, you can see that I've highlighted 3 progressive nouns, maturing, conspiring, and budding, all of them indicating that this is an ongoing process. It's not finite, it hasn't ended, it's still going on. I've also in red underlined some of the really positive and warm diction: mellow and fruitful, bosom friend, maturing, loading and blessing, and maybe not so much the thatcheves, but there's a really warm kind of homely feel there, right? And then in the green underlining, I've underlined all the plentiful fruits that are coming from this ripening autumn, with the fruits and the apples and the gourd, the hazel, the kernel, the flower, and the cells of the honeycomb that's overflowing with the clammy honey. And all of this is hinting at the summer that's just gone by, the summer when things have matured, and that we're now getting to benefit from as we move into the later part of autumn. So we'll see how this shifts when we move into stanza 2. So as we enter stanza 2, we can see straight away there's a change in the type of images that we get. In stanza 1, the imagery is primarily olfactory and gustatory. We're dealing with scents and tastes and various foods and perfumes. And we'll see later on when we proceed into stanza 3 that the imagery changes to much more oral imagery. We hear the sounds of late autumn. But here in stanza 2, the imagery is mainly visual, some hints of even tactile imagery as the figures are sitting around on the granary floor, etc. So stanza 2 continues the apostrophe from the first stanza. We continue to speak to a personified autumn, and we now open with a rhetorical question, or a question of some sort. Who has not seen thee oft amid thy store, which seems to indicate that anyone who looks will have seen autumn sit like this, so presumably it is a common occurrence, something that happens frequently. Sometimes whoever seeks may find you, so it's clearly something that is not unusual. I think that it's interesting to see how this autumn person is sitting carelessly on a granary floor. Seems to take very little, pay little attention to what's going on, as if this person is aging or tiring, but quite content to be reaching the end of their life or whatever is going on. So there's a great sense of fulfillment in this stanza. The wind that's lifting the hair is gentle. It's soft lifting the hair. And even though the wind might be winnowing, it's unsettling. But there's also an element of cleansing in the wind. Excuse me. So this character, the Reaper person, seems to be quite content sitting there, even though the work is incomplete. That one of the furrows is half reaped, but he's still sound asleep, and he's drowsed with the fume of poppies. So again, we're kind of having a connotation of maybe opium usage here, even though we are pretty sure that Keats was not a user, or at least not a heavy user of opium, the way that Coleridge and the others were. But there's also obviously the poppy as in a flower, and the scent of nature coming there to inspire and provide solace. We then see this reaper man, which is obviously not a grim reaper, even though it might have the same function, but he's clearly gentle and caring, because with the hook, the scythe, he's sparing the next swathe, so sparing the flowers from getting cut up or severed from their roots. So it's a merciful figure that's here, and is also very careful and selective, because like a gleaner, someone who carefully selects the grains, picks up the grains that are left behind. He's taking great care with his crops. So it's a very patient person, and obviously we get that much more in the last two lines of this stanza, where the person is sitting by a cider press, patiently looking at the last drops oozing out of the apples down into the barrel hour after hour. So clearly someone who's not rushed, who's taken their time, and who really cares about what they're doing. At the end of this last stanza, when we feel the calm and the collection all the way through, but particularly the last few lines of this stanza, the pace really drops, and I think that's a combination of the diction as well as the sentence structure, really dragging out the pace and slowing down the stanza into the final third stanza. So in the third stanza we start off with two questions. First, where are the songs of spring? Where are they? To really stress that question. So spring is long gone, we're now far away from spring, and so we're getting closer to winter. There's a disconnect between summer and where we are now. And it's almost as if it's autumn itself, the personified autumn, that's asking these questions, because the speaker comes in to reassure him with the imperative of the next line, where it's saying, "Think not of them, thou hast thy music too." So it's as if that's meant to reassure this person who's asking the questions. But that's not entirely clear. It might be questions from the speaker as well. So we're continuing our progression towards winter and the foreshadowing of winter, and we have an echo of the previous stanza of the soft lifted hair in the now soft dying day. So the day is coming to an end, and we get the touch of the stubble plains, so where the reaper has gone through and cut all the grains off, we now only have stubble on the plains, and we start getting the sounds of winter coming through here. Of late autumn, in the wailful choir, the small gnats that are mourning, the loud bleat of the lambs, the crickets singing, the redbreast whistling, and the swallows twittering. All of these very rural sounds, but they're the sounds of dusk, and really building an oral image of a late night as we move into this late time of day. And we get the references to living and dying continually throughout here. The light wind lives or dies. The day is dying. Lambs tend to bleat when their young ones are slaughtered. The full-grown lambs would be bleating for days after their young ones are slaughtered. All of these combined giving us a fairly complete picture of the end of life. So that brings us to the end of this lesson on to autumn. I've intentionally made this video quite brief, and I haven't developed every single word and line, simply for us to have more meat for our discussion next lesson. So what I'd like you to do for the next lesson is the following. Have a look through the poem and find specific examples of temporality, or how he plays with temporality, mortality and explorations of mortality, and examples of mutability or immutability that I didn't explicitly mention in this video. I'd then like you to write down two things that you still wonder about the poem. So it could be two questions that you'd like to be clarified, or two things that interest you about the poem but that you don't feel were quite elaborated upon. And thirdly, bring 3 discussion questions for the class. So they could be things that you don't necessarily agree with, but that are kind of there to stir discussion and get the class speaking. And we'll do a Socratic discussion on this poem and next lesson. All right, looking forward to seeing you all in class tomorrow.